The massive doors of the Galactic Council chamber slid open with a soft hiss. Ambassador Elena Vasquez walked through them with steady steps, her black uniform simple compared to the colorful robes and strange clothing worn by the other species around her. Behind her came General Chen, his military bearing obvious even in diplomatic clothes, and Dr. Sarah Okafor, who carried a data pad filled with reports that nobody seemed to want to read. The chamber was huge, built to hold representatives from 47 different worlds and species. The ceiling stretched up so high that it disappeared into darkness. Around the circular room, each species had their own special area designed for their needs. The crystal-like Zephyrians floated in low-gravity bubbles that glowed with soft blue light. The fish-like Nautilans sat in water-filled tanks with mechanical legs that let them move around. The insect-like Thektar clustered together in groups, their minds connected in ways humans still did not understand. In the center of this alien gathering, the human delegation looked almost boring. They had 3 simple chairs at a small table. No special equipment, no fancy displays, just 3 people representing all of humanity in the galaxy. Elena had been coming to these peace talks for 3 months now. 3 months of listening to demands that grew worse each week. 3 months of watching alien faces turn cold when she tried to explain the human position. 3 months of realizing that this council did not want peace with humans. They wanted submission. The hegemony chancellor stood up from his raised platform. Vorthak was 8 feet tall, covered in thick gray skin that looked like armor. His forearms moved as he spoke, and his deep voice filled the chamber. "Today we will settle the human question once and for all," he announced. The translation devices around the room hummed as his words were changed into dozens of languages. "The Galactic Council has been patient with humanity," Vorthak continued. "We have tried to work with you, to find a place for your species in our civilization. But humans continue to expand too fast, to take too many risks, to upset the balance we have built over thousands of years." Elena felt General Chen shift beside her. She knew he wanted to speak, to defend humanity's actions, but she had asked him to stay quiet. Let them talk first. Let them show their real intentions. "Therefore," Vorthak said, his voice growing louder, "the Council presents these final terms to the human delegation." He picked up a crystal device that projected words into the air above the chamber. "First, humans will withdraw from all Outer Rim territories within 1 standard year. Second, all human terraforming technology will be shared freely with the Council for proper regulation. Third, human colonies will accept Council observers to ensure compliance with galactic peace standards." The chamber filled with clicking, buzzing, and whistling sounds as the alien representatives showed their approval. Elena read through the projected terms carefully. They were even worse than she had expected. The withdrawal from the Outer Rim would abandon millions of human colonists. Sharing terraforming technology would give other species the tools to reshape worlds that humans had spent decades learning to change safely, and Council observers would mean the end of human independence. Dr. Okafor leaned over and whispered, "Elena, these terms would make us a client species. We would have no real freedom left." Elena nodded. She had known this moment would come. For months she had reported back to Earth about the growing hostility in these talks. The other species saw humanity as a threat not because humans were violent, but because they were successful. Human colonies thrived in places other species could not live. Human technology solved problems that had stumped alien scientists for centuries. Human traders and diplomats had become essential parts of galactic commerce and politics. But instead of seeing humans as valuable partners, the Council saw them as dangerous competitors. They wanted to control human growth, limit human influence, and keep humanity in a cage of their making. The Zephyrian representative, a being of living crystal named Shalneth, spoke next. "Humans are young and do not understand the wisdom of slow, careful progress. The Council offers guidance to help humanity mature into proper galactic citizens." The way she said proper made Elena's stomach twist. She had heard that tone before, in history books about colonial powers talking about civilizing primitive peoples. The irony was bitter. Here in space, among the stars, the same old patterns were playing out again. Chancellor Vorthak looked directly at Elena. "What is the human response to these generous terms?" Elena stood up slowly. The chamber grew quiet. Even the constant humming of translation devices seemed to fade. She looked around the room at faces that ranged from hopeful to smug to openly hostile. These beings thought they had cornered humanity, forced them into a position where they had no choice but to accept whatever scraps the Council offered. The Human Systems Alliance has carefully considered the Council's proposal, Elena said. Her voice was calm and clear, carrying easily through the vast chamber. We came to these talks hoping to build a future where all species could work together as equals. We offered to share our knowledge, our resources, and our friendship. She paused, letting her words sink in. Instead, we have been presented with an ultimatum that would strip humanity of its independence and dignity. We are told that our success is a threat, that our growth must be stopped, that our people must accept foreign oversight. General Chen stood up beside her, his face set in stone. Dr. Okafor also rose, her datapad forgotten on the table. The three humans faced the assembled might of galactic civilization. Therefore, Elena continued, the Human Systems Alliance formally withdraws from these negotiations. We will not accept terms that treat humanity as a conquered species rather than an equal partner. The silence that followed was complete. No clicking, no buzzing, no whispered conversations. Elena could almost feel the shock radiating from the alien representatives. They had expected humans to bargain, to compromise, to eventually accept a reduced position in galactic society. They had not expected humans to simply walk away. Chancellor Vorthak was the first to recover. You cannot simply leave, he said, his forearms spreading wide. The Council represents the will of 46 worlds. Humanity cannot stand alone against all of galactic civilization. Elena picked up her simple briefcase and looked at the Chancellor. We have no desire to stand against anyone. We simply refuse to kneel before them. As the human delegation walked toward the exit, Elena heard frantic conversations breaking out behind them. Alien voices rose in anger, confusion, and what might have been fear. The Nautolan representative was demanding immediate economic sanctions. The Tektar were buzzing among themselves in their hive mind language. The Etherians were calling for military action to force human compliance. But Elena did not look back. General Chen held the door open for her and Dr. Okafor, and they walked out of the chamber together. In the hallway beyond, Elena finally allowed herself a small smile. Do you think they understand what just happened? Dr. Okafor asked quietly. Not yet, Elena replied. But they will. General Chen nodded grimly. They think they called our bluff. They have no idea that we were never bluffing. As their shuttle lifted off from Kepler Prime, Elena looked down at the sprawling council complex growing smaller below them. Somewhere in those buildings, alien representatives were probably still arguing about the human response, still convinced that economic pressure or military threats could bring humanity back to the negotiating table. They were about to learn how wrong they were. Humanity had tried peace, had tried cooperation, had tried to be good galactic citizens. Now they would show the galaxy what happened when you mistook human patience for human weakness. The stars stretched out before them, vast and full of possibility, and for the first time in months Elena felt truly free. Captain Zalthok drummed his clawed fingers against the metal surface of his command console aboard the Meridian fleet vessel Starcutter. Through the viewport he watched another human cargo ship disappear into hyperspace without delivering its scheduled supplies to mining station Omega-7. That made the third cancellation this week, sir, his communications officer called out. The station commander is requesting an explanation for the delayed shipments. Zalthok's scaled hide rippled with annoyance. Tell them it is probably some human negotiating tactic. They are trying to pressure the council by withholding trade. But even as he said the words, Zalthok felt a nagging doubt. He had dealt with humans for 7 years, and this behavior seemed different. Usually when humans wanted to make a political point, they made it loudly and clearly. The silent withdrawal felt more like abandonment. 3 sectors away, Dr. Kethara floated in her tank aboard the research station Deep Thought. As the Council's chief economist and an Etherian, she experienced the galaxy through careful analysis of data flows and economic patterns. What she was seeing in her reports made no sense. Human trade ships had stopped arriving at 17 different worlds in the past 6 weeks. At first, the pattern looked random. A few missed deliveries here, some canceled contracts there. But when Dr. Kethara mapped out the cancellations, she saw something that made her breathing apparatus flutter with alarm. Humans were not just reducing trade. They were carefully, systematically withdrawing from every economic relationship they had built over the past century. Raw materials that only human miners could extract from dangerous asteroid fields were no longer being shipped. Rare elements that human deep space expeditions had risked their lives to gather were staying in human space. Most concerning of all, the complex financial instruments that human banks had created to facilitate interspecies trade were being quietly liquidated. On the frontier world of New Geneva, Administrator Veltar watched the last human agricultural team pack their equipment onto a transport ship. The humans had spent 5 years helping local Centaurian farmers adapt Earth crops to grow in alien soil. Their work had turned New Geneva from a struggling colony into a thriving agricultural center. But the growing season is not finished, Veltar protested to Dr. Sandra Martinez, the human team leader. The hybrid corn we planted will fail without proper care. Our people do not know how to maintain the soil balance you created. Dr. Martinez looked genuinely sad as she sealed the last equipment case. I am sorry, Veltar. I truly am. But we have been ordered to return to human space immediately. Ordered by whom? Veltar demanded. The peace talks are still ongoing, are they not? Dr. Martinez met his 4 eyes with her too. The peace talks ended 6 weeks ago. We are no longer welcome as equals in galactic society, so we are leaving. After the human transport lifted off, Veltar stood in the empty fields that Dr. Martinez and her team had spent years perfecting. Already he could see signs of trouble. The soil pH was shifting without constant human monitoring. The irrigation systems were running on automatic programs that the humans had set up, but no local engineer understood how to modify them if conditions changed. Within a month, Veltar realized, New Geneva would face its first food crisis in 5 years. Similar scenes played out across the galaxy. On the industrial world of Forge Prime, human technical advisors quietly finished their current projects and departed without training replacements. The massive atmospheric processors that kept the planet habitable had been designed by human engineers, and while other species could operate them, none understood the complex maintenance procedures that kept them running. Safely, Engineer Koroth of the Decatur Collective noticed the problem first when he tried to replace a worn component in Processor Station 7. The part seemed simple enough, a quantum field regulator that maintained atmospheric pressure in the lower zones. But when Koroth installed the replacement part, the entire system began operating outside normal parameters. The humans made it look easy. Koroth buzzed to his hive mates through their shared mental link, but their documentation is incomplete. They have not explained the intuitive adjustments they made during operation. What Koroth did not understand was that human engineers often made dozens of small modifications to equipment during its lifetime, changes so minor that they hardly seemed worth documenting. But these tiny adjustments, accumulated over years, made the difference between reliable operation and catastrophic failure. As Processor Station 7 continued to malfunction, Koroth realized that humanity had not just operated their technology, they had evolved it through constant small improvements that no other species had bothered to learn. In the communication center on Kepler Prime, Zephyrian technician Shalvek noticed another troubling pattern. The quantum relay network that connected distant parts of the galaxy was experiencing increasing numbers of small failures. Nothing dramatic, just brief interruptions in data flow, minor timing errors, occasional packet losses that required manual correction. The relay network was based on human mathematical models, but it had been built and maintained by a cooperative effort among many species. What Shalvek was discovering, much to her crystalline horror, was that the human contribution had been far more fundamental than anyone realized. The base algorithms are human-designed, she reported to her supervisor. We adapted them for our quantum systems, but we never fully understood the underlying principles. The humans must have been making constant small corrections to maintain network stability. Surely our best mathematicians can solve any problems that arise, her supervisor replied. Shalavek's crystal form dimmed with worry. I am not certain. The human approach to mathematics is different from ours. They use intuitive leaps that our logic-based systems cannot replicate. Without their ongoing input, I fear the network will slowly degrade. On the edge of known space, the early warning sensor platforms that watched for incoming threats went dark one by one. These platforms had been built jointly by the Council species, but they were maintained primarily by human technicians who were willing to work in the dangerous Isolated conditions at the galaxy's rim. Security Chief Velnoth received the reports with growing unease. Sensor Platform Delta 9 has gone offline, his aide reported. No response to communication attempts. Send a maintenance crew, Velnoth ordered. Sir, all the maintenance crews for the rim platforms were human. They departed 3 weeks ago. Velnoth felt a chill that had nothing to do with the temperature in his office. The early warning network protected the entire galaxy from external threats, pirate fleets, rogue asteroids, and the occasional hostile alien probe from unknown regions of space. Without constant maintenance in the harsh conditions at the galaxy's edge, the sensors would fail within months, and apparently, only humans had been willing to do that dangerous, thankless work. As reports flooded in from across galactic civilization, a pattern emerged that no one had expected. Humans had not just been participants in the galactic community, they had been its hidden foundation. In industry after industry, world after world, human expertise had become so routine that other species had forgotten how essential it was. The humans had not conquered through force or dominated through politics. They had simply made themselves useful in 1,000 small ways, solving problems that other species found difficult or dangerous. Now that usefulness was disappearing, and the galaxy was beginning to understand what it had lost. But the humans were not making demands or issuing ultimatums. They were simply gone, leaving behind a civilization that was slowly discovering how much it had depended on the species it had tried to control. Dr. Kethera floated in her tank, staring at economic projections that grew more frightening each day. The galaxy was not facing a crisis, it was facing a collapse, and the only people who might be able to prevent it were the ones they had driven away. Commander Velnash of the border guard vessel Stellar Warden received the distress call at 347 hours ship time. Through the static-filled transmission, he could make out the panicked voice of a Meridian trader captain. Unknown vessels attacking convoy Delta 7. Lost 2 ships already, requesting immediate assistance. Velnash checked his navigation display. The attack was happening in the neutral zone between Meridian and Hegemony space, a region that had been peaceful for over 50 years.
Set course for Convoy Delta 7, maximum speed, he ordered his crew. As the Stellar Warden jumped to hyperspace,
Velnash wondered who would be foolish enough to attack merchant ships in neutral territory. The answer came when his ship dropped back into normal space near the convoy. Pirates. 3 converted warships with mismatched weapons and improvised armor were systematically destroying the merchant vessels. Velnash had not seen pirate activity this bold in decades. The last time raiders had dared to attack convoys in neutral space, human peacekeeping forces had hunted them down and destroyed their entire fleet within weeks. But there were no human peacekeepers anymore. All raiders. "This is Commander Velnash of the Galactic Border Guard," he broadcast. "Cease your attack immediately and withdraw to minimum safe distance." The pirate leader's response shocked him. "Border Guard vessel, you will withdraw or be destroyed. This convoy is now our property." Velnash stared at his communications display in disbelief. Pirates were threatening a border guard ship. In 50 years of service, he had never heard such arrogance. Pirates had always fled at the first sign of official vessels, knowing that human military advisors made the border guard far more effective than their small numbers suggested. The engagement that followed was brief and humiliating. The pirates had better weapons, better armor, and more ships than Velnash's single vessel could handle. The Stellar Warden managed to damage 1 raider before being forced to retreat, leaving the merchant convoy to its fate. As his ship limped back to base for repairs, Velnash realized that the galaxy had become a much more dangerous place. Without human peacekeeping forces and military advisors, every pirate crew and rebel faction would soon learn that law enforcement had become far less effective. 2 sectors away, environmental engineer Korthala stood in the ruins of what had once been the most beautiful garden on Paradise Station. The weather control system had finally collapsed completely, bringing devastating storms that had destroyed 20 years of careful cultivation. "The atmospheric processors are still running," his assistant reported, "but they are no longer coordinating with each other. Each system is operating independently, creating conflicting weather patterns." Korthala nodded grimly. The human engineers who had designed the terraforming systems had built them to work together like a symphony orchestra, each component playing its part in perfect harmony. But without a conductor to coordinate their efforts, the systems had become a cacophony of conflicting signals. How long before the atmosphere becomes unbreathable? He asked. His assistant consulted her instruments. At current rates of degradation, perhaps 18 months. Maybe less if the chemical imbalances continue to accelerate. Across the galaxy, similar ecological disasters were unfolding. The terraforming systems that had created dozens of garden worlds were failing one by one, forcing mass evacuations as once perfect environments became uninhabitable. But the worst crisis was developing along the border regions where different alien civilizations met. For over a century, human diplomats had maintained a careful balance of power, preventing the ancient territorial disputes from exploding into open warfare. General Korthax studied the tactical displays in his command bunker deep beneath Hegemony Prime. Red symbols marked Meridian fleet movements along the border. Intelligence reports indicated massive military buildups on both sides of the neutral zone. The Meridians claim we are violating the Kepler Accords by fortifying asteroid base, Gamma, his intelligence chief reported. They are demanding immediate withdrawal of our forces, Korthax laughed bitterly. The Kepler Accords were a masterpiece of human diplomacy. 17 different territorial agreements balanced against each other so perfectly that none of us dared upset the arrangement. But I doubt any of us remember exactly how they worked. Sir, should we comply with the Meridian demands? Absolutely not. That base is crucial to our defense network. Let the Meridians complain to the Galactic Council. But the Galactic Council was discovering that it had no power to resolve disputes without human mediation. The complex legal frameworks that had maintained peace for decades were breaking down as each species interpreted old agreements to favor their own interests. On the trade world of Commerce Station, Administrator Veltar watched his carefully maintained economy collapse as alien merchants refused to honor contracts that human arbitrators were no longer available to enforce. The sophisticated financial instruments that had made interstellar trade possible required constant adjustment by human economists who understood the complex interactions between dozens of different economic systems. The Zephyrian Collective is refusing to deliver the quantum crystals we ordered, his aide reported. They claim the payment terms have changed due to currency fluctuations. Have the terms changed? Veltar asked. According to our contract software, no. But the Zephyrians are using different exchange rate calculations than we are. Without human financial experts to arbitrate the dispute, we have no way to resolve the disagreement. Similar trade disputes were erupting across the galaxy as the economic systems that humans had carefully balanced began to fragment along species lines. Each alien civilization was reverting to the economic practices it understood best, creating incompatible systems that could no longer interact smoothly. Dr. Kithara presented her latest reports to increasingly desperate council members. Interstellar trade volume has dropped by 47% in the past 3 months, she announced. Currency exchange rates are becoming unstable as confidence in the galactic economy declines. But surely this is temporary, protested the Nautolan representative. Once we adapt to operating without human intermediaries, trade will resume normal patterns. Dr. Kithara's response was bleak. The human role in galactic commerce was far more extensive than anyone realized. They did not just facilitate trade, they created the mathematical models that made complex interstellar economics possible. Without their ongoing management, the entire system is reverting to a collection of isolated planetary economies. The military situation was deteriorating even faster than the economic one. Without human strategic advisors, the various species were falling back on their traditional approaches to warfare, which inevitably led to conflict. The first shooting war began when a Meridian patrol ship destroyed a hegemony mining operation in a disputed asteroid field. Both sides claimed the other had fired first. Both sides demanded council intervention, but the council had no mechanism for resolving the dispute without human mediators. Within weeks, the conflict had spread to 3 different star systems. Ancient grudges that human diplomats had carefully managed for decades exploded into open warfare. Species that had cooperated peacefully under human guidance reverted to the suspicious, territorial behavior that had characterized galactic politics before humanity joined the community. On the research station orbiting Hermes 9, Dr. Quintex watched the radiation shields fail just as she had predicted. The evacuation was chaotic. With alien crews abandoning decades of research as deadly, radiation flooded the facility. We could have prevented this if the humans had been willing to help, her assistant said bitterly as their shuttle pulled away from the dying station. Dr. Quintek said nothing, but she knew the truth was more complicated. The humans had tried to help for over a century, sharing their knowledge and expertise freely. But instead of learning from human methods, the other species had simply become dependent on human solutions. Now that dependency was being revealed as the fundamental weakness it had always been. In his private office, Chancellor Vorthak reviewed intelligence reports that painted a picture of galactic civilization in free fall. Pirate raids were increasing. Border conflicts were spreading. Trade networks were collapsing. Terraformed worlds were becoming uninhabitable, all because one species had withdrawn from galactic affairs. "How many crises are we facing simultaneously?" he asked his chief of staff. 17 major military conflicts, 43 economic disputes requiring council arbitration, 12 ecological disasters requiring immediate evacuation, and an unknown number of technical failures across critical infrastructure systems. Vorthak had ruled the hegemony for 30 years, but he had never faced a crisis of this magnitude. The galaxy was not just experiencing problems, it was experiencing systemic collapse, and the only species with the knowledge and expertise to fix the situation was the one they had driven away. For the first time since the peace talks had ended, Vorthak began to wonder if the council had made a terrible mistake. But pride and political necessity prevented him from admitting it publicly. Not yet. The galaxy would have to fall much further before its leaders would be willing to admit that they needed the humans they had spurned. But that day was coming faster than anyone had imagined. Dr. Quintex pressed her webbed hands against the radiation shielding of Laboratory Complex 7, feeling the subtle vibrations that should not have been there. As a Nautilus physicist, she had spent most of her life studying the deadly energies that poured out of the pulsar Hermes 9. The research station orbiting this collapsed star was one of the most dangerous scientific outposts in the galaxy, and it was only possible because of the exotic radiation shields that protected it. Those shields were failing. "The quantum harmonics are wrong," she reported to Station Commander Velnash through her breathing apparatus. "The shielding should produce a steady 97.4 kilohertz hum. Instead, I am detecting fluctuations of plus or minus 3%. Commander Velnash, a practical Centaurian with little patience for scientific details, did not understand the implications. "Is it dangerous?" "Eventually, yes. The fluctuations will grow larger over time. In perhaps 6 months, the shields will fail completely. When that happens, the radiation from the pulsar will kill everyone on this station within hours. Then we must repair them. Contact the shield manufacturer for replacement parts." Dr. Quintex had been afraid he would say that. "Sir, the shields were designed and built by Stellar Dynamics Corporation. That was a human company." The silence that followed told Dr. Quintex that Commander Velnash was beginning to understand their situation. Like most beings in the galaxy, he had grown accustomed to human engineering being available whenever it was needed. The thought that it might simply disappear had never occurred to him. "Surely we can find the technical documentation," he said finally. "Our engineers can learn to maintain human equipment." Dr. Quintex had spent the past week trying to do exactly that. What she had discovered was deeply disturbing. The radiation shields did not work the way Nautilus physics said they should work. According to her calculations, the quantum field generators should have torn themselves apart within hours of activation. Instead, they had been running perfectly for 15 years. "The humans used mathematical principles that we do not understand," she explained. "Their approach to quantum mechanics is different from ours. Where we see impossible contradictions, they somehow found stable solutions. This was happening across the galaxy. On Forge Prime, Thektar engineers stared at atmospheric processors that defied their understanding of thermodynamics. The machines worked perfectly, but their operation violated several fundamental laws of physics as the Thektar understood them. Engineer Koroth and his hive mates had torn apart one of the smaller processors, trying to understand its design. What they found inside made no sense. The quantum coils were arranged in patterns that should have created destructive interference. The plasma conduits were connected in ways that should have caused catastrophic feedback loops. The pressure regulation systems used algorithms that no Thektar mathematician could derive. It is as if the humans built these machines through trial and error, rather than scientific theory. Koroth buzzed to his collective. But that should have taken thousands of years, not decades. What Koroth did not know was that humans approached engineering differently than any other species in the galaxy. Where aliens relied on pure mathematical theory, humans combined theory with intuition, experimentation, and a willingness to try solutions that looked impossible on paper. They built prototypes, tested them under real conditions, and modified them based on what actually worked rather than what should work. This practical approach had led to innovations that more theoretical species could operate but could not improve or even fully understand on the communication hub world of Relay Station Prime. Zephyrian technician Shalvek faced a similar crisis. The quantum communication network that connected 47 worlds was experiencing cascade failures that spread from node to node like a disease. The base code is destabilizing, she reported to the Council's Emergency Technical Committee. The error correction algorithms are becoming less effective each day. Counselor Velthros, an elderly Etherian with little technical knowledge, demanded an explanation in simple terms. Surely this is just a maintenance issue. Replace the failing components. Shalvek's crystal form flickered with frustration. Counselor, the components are not failing. The mathematical foundation itself is changing. The network was designed using human probability theories that we adapted without fully understanding. As conditions change across the galaxy, the network is encountering situations that the original human designers anticipated but we did not. She projected a three-dimensional map of the communication network above the committee table. Red zones marked areas where failures were spreading, and the pattern was clearly visible. The network was stable only in regions where human technicians had been making regular adjustments to the base algorithms. The humans were not just maintaining the hardware, Shalvek explained. They were constantly evolving the software to handle new conditions. Without their ongoing input, the network is slowly returning to a less stable state. The implications went far beyond communications. On 17 different worlds, terraforming systems were beginning to show signs of instability. The atmospheric processors, weather control networks, and ecological balance systems that made these worlds habitable all relied on complex algorithms that humans had developed through decades of trial and error. On the garden world of Paradise Station, environmental engineer Korthala watched in horror as the carefully maintained weather patterns began to shift. For 20 years, the climate control system had produced gentle rains every third day, maintaining perfect growing conditions for both native plants and imported crops. Now the rains came irregularly, sometimes too heavy, sometimes not at all. The atmospheric composition was shifting in subtle ways that the monitoring systems reported as within acceptable parameters, but which were actually signs of approaching ecological collapse. The control algorithms are too rigid, Korthala reported to his supervisors. They cannot adapt to natural variations the way the human designers intended. The system was built to be flexible, but we do not know how to maintain that flexibility. Military commanders across the galaxy were discovering similar problems. General Korthax of the Hegemony Defense Force reviewed tactical reports with growing alarm. The point defense systems that protected hegemony worlds used targeting algorithms developed by human military engineers. These systems had successfully defended against pirate raids and asteroid impacts for decades. But now the algorithms were showing signs of degradation. Response times were getting slower. Target recognition was becoming less accurate. The systems still worked, but they were clearly operating below optimal efficiency. The human advisors made constant small adjustments to the targeting parameters, reported Chief Engineer Velmar. They called it learning from experience. Our systems can follow pre-programmed instructions, but they cannot learn from new situations the way the humans taught them to. What was emerging across the galaxy was a pattern that no one had anticipated. Human technology did not just work, it evolved. Human engineers did not just build systems, they nurtured them, adjusted them, and improved them continuously based on real-world performance. Other species had become dependent not just on human innovations, but on human intuition. They had relied on humanity's unique ability to find solutions through experimentation and adaptation rather than pure theory. Now that intuitive guidance was gone, and galactic civilization was discovering that its most critical systems were slowly degrading without human oversight, In the council chambers on Kepler Prime, emergency sessions convened daily as reports poured in from across the galaxy. The Meridian representative brought news of failing shipping schedules. The Thektar reported industrial accidents on 3 different worlds. The Zephyrians warned of communication blackouts in outer sectors, and through it all, human space remained silent. No responses to diplomatic messages, no offers of technical assistance, no threats or demands, just an empty void where humanity's voice had once been heard. Dr. Cathara presented her latest economic analysis to an audience of increasingly desperate alien officials. The human withdrawal is not just affecting current operations, she reported. It is revealing fundamental weaknesses in our technological infrastructure that we never knew existed. How is this possible? Demanded Chancellor Vorthak. We have our own engineers, our own scientists. Surely we can solve any problems that arise. Dr. Cathara's response sent a chill through the chamber. We can solve problems using the knowledge we already have. But the humans were creating new knowledge constantly through methods we do not understand. Without their ongoing innovations, our technology will slowly become obsolete. The galaxy was beginning to realize that it had not just lost human cooperation. It had lost access to the human approach to science and engineering that had been quietly driving technological progress for over a century, and no one knew how to replace it. The Nexus gate above Kepler Prime flickered and died at exactly 13:47 hours, Galactic Standard Time. The massive structure, 3 kilometers across and bristling with quantum field generators, simply went dark. Within minutes, the communication networks throughout the inner systems began reporting the same thing. The gates were failing, one by one, cutting off faster than light travel between the most important worlds in the galaxy. Emergency Session 847 of the Galactic Council convened 6 hours later, but many representatives had to attend by quantum link because their ships could no longer reach Kepler Prime quickly. Chancellor Vorthak looked out at the half-empty chamber and felt a cold certainty settle in his stomach. The galaxy was dying. "Status report," he commanded, though he already knew it would be bad news. Dr. Cathara's hologram flickered as she transmitted from her research station 3 sectors away. 17 Nexus gates have failed in the past 24 hours. Another 31 are showing signs of instability. At current rates of deterioration, the entire gate network will collapse within 6 standard months. The silence that followed was complete. Without the Nexus gates, travel between distant systems would take months instead of days. The galactic community that had existed for over 1,000 years would fragment into isolated clusters of worlds, cut off from each other by the vast emptiness of space. "Can we repair them?" asked the Zephyrian representative, though her crystal form was already dimming with despair. "We are trying," Dr. Cathara replied. "But the gates use human quantum mathematics that we still do not fully understand. The repair manuals assume knowledge that only human engineers possess." General Korthax, attending by hologram from a military bunker on Hegemony Prime, delivered the military report. "The border wars have spread to 12 systems. Without Nexus gate transport, I cannot move reinforcements to threatened sectors quickly enough to contain the conflicts. Pirate activity has increased by 300%. And our intelligence networks are failing as communication delays make coordination impossible." The Meridian representative, Admiral Veltok, nodded grimly. "The Meridian Confederation faces the same problems. Our patrol fleets are isolated from Central Command. We are fighting a dozen separate wars instead of coordinating our defenses." But the worst news came from the environmental monitoring stations. Engineer Korthala reported by emergency transmission from Paradise Station, which was now being evacuated for the 2nd time in 6 months. 37 terraformed worlds are experiencing ecological collapse, he announced. "The atmospheric processors are failing faster than we can repair them. We estimate that 12 million beings will need to be relocated within the next year." Chancellor Vorthak listened to report after report of disaster and failure. Each crisis was bad enough on its own, but together they painted a picture of civilizational collapse. The galactic community that had taken millennia to build was unraveling in less than a year. "How did we become so dependent on one species?" he asked, though he already knew the answer. Dr. Velnok, the Council's senior analyst, provided the explanation that no one wanted to hear. We became dependent because humans were better at solving problems than we were, not through force or manipulation, but through competence. She activated a holographic display that showed the growth of human involvement in galactic affairs over the past century. Humans did not seek to control our civilization. They simply offered solutions to problems we could not solve ourselves. When our trade networks became too complex to manage, humans created the economic models that made interstellar commerce possible. When our border disputes threatened to explode into wars, humans developed the diplomatic frameworks that maintained peace. When we needed to terraform hostile worlds, humans invented the technologies that made it safe and efficient. The display showed how human innovations had spread throughout galactic civilization, becoming so routine that other species had forgotten they were dependent on them. We mistook their cooperation for weakness, Dr. Velnock continued. We thought they were junior partners who could be controlled through superior numbers and political pressure. We never realized that they had become the foundation that our entire civilization rested upon. The bitter irony was not lost on anyone in the chamber. In trying to limit human influence, the Council had proven that human influence was already complete. Humanity had not conquered the galaxy through military might or economic domination. They had become indispensable through sheer competence and innovation. The Etherian representative, Councillor Melthera, spoke for many when she said, "We sought to prevent human dominance by restricting their activities. Instead, we discovered that they already dominated us in ways we never understood." "What are our options?" Chancellor Vorthak asked, though he suspected he already knew the answer. General Korthax was blunt. "We can continue fighting separate wars with degrading equipment and failing supply lines until our civilizations collapse into barbarism, or we can swallow our pride and ask the humans to help us fix what we have broken." "They will never agree," protested the Nautolan representative. "We insulted them, threatened them, tried to reduce them to a client species. Why would they help us now?" Dr. Kethara had been studying human psychology and behavior patterns for months, trying to understand how they approached problems so differently from other species. Her analysis was both hopeful and humbling. "Humans are unique in their approach to cooperation," she reported. "Most species cooperate when it benefits them directly. Humans seem to cooperate when it benefits the larger community, even when they gain nothing personally. Their history is full of examples of humans helping former enemies, rebuilding societies that had fought against them, sharing knowledge with competitors. But they also have a concept called justice," she continued. "They will not help those who refuse to acknowledge wrongdoing. Any appeal to humanity must include a genuine admission that we were wrong to treat them as inferiors." Chancellor Vorthak felt the weight of his position settling on his shoulders like a heavy blanket. As the leader of the most powerful single species in the Council, his words would carry enormous weight. What he said next would determine whether galactic civilization survived or collapsed into isolated fragments. "Draft a formal communication to the Human Systems Alliance," he ordered. "Include a complete apology for our actions during the peace talks. Acknowledge that we were wrong to treat humanity as a threat rather than a partner. And ask, humbly, for their assistance in preventing the collapse of galactic civilization." The chamber was silent as the implications sank in. They were about to admit that the species they had tried to subjugate was actually essential to their survival. "Sir," his aide whispered, "this will be seen as a humiliating admission of weakness." Chancellor Vorthak looked around the chamber at the representatives of 46 different worlds and species. Many were attending by hologram, because they could no longer travel to Kepler Prime. Others were absent entirely, cut off by the failure of communication networks or trapped by the chaos in their home systems. "The alternative is the end of galactic civilization," he said quietly. "I think a little humiliation is preferable to complete collapse." 3 days later, the communication was transmitted to human space through the few remaining functional communication relays. It was brief, formal, and unprecedented in the history of galactic politics. To the Human Systems Alliance, the Galactic Council formally apologizes for its actions during the recent peace negotiations. We acknowledge that our demands were unjust and our treatment of humanity was inappropriate. We have learned that human contributions to galactic civilization were far more extensive and essential than we realized. We humbly request renewed cooperation to address the critical challenges facing all species in the galaxy. The message was, signed by every member of the Council, a display of unity that had never been achieved before. Now they could only wait and hope that humanity's mercy would prove as remarkable as their competence. On Terra Prime, Ambassador Elena Vasquez read the message in her secure office, her expression unreadable. General Chen and Dr. Okafor sat across from her, waiting for her response. "Well," Dr. Okafor said finally, "they certainly took longer to figure it out than I expected." General Chen was less charitable. "They drove us away when they thought they were strong. Now they come crawling back when they realize they are weak." Elena set down the message and looked out the window at the bustling streets of the human capital. In the distance, she could see spaceships launching toward the stars, carrying human settlers to new worlds that no other species had been willing or able to colonize. "The question," she said quietly, "is whether we are wise enough to help them despite their foolishness, or whether we let them face the consequences of their choices." The fate of galactic civilization hung in the balance, waiting for humanity to decide whether forgiveness was possible after such profound betrayal.